Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rebecca Basciano, and I'm the curator at the Ottawa Art Gallery. I'd like to welcome you to our program with artist Craig Commanda, whose work is currently on view in our exhibition, Filtered. As with all of our programs, virtual or not, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the Ottawa Art Gallery, the host institution of this program, is situated on the traditional and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin peoples. I'm speaking to you from my home today, which is on the same territory. Craig is speaking to us from Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, the traditional territory of the Ghanaian Gahaga. Thank you for being with us here today, Craig. It's very exciting. This is the first time we've been able to include your work in an exhibition at the OAG, and we're very excited to discuss your artistic practice today. Before beginning, though, I'll speak briefly to the context of the talk and provide a little bit more information about Craig. So Craig Commanda is an Anishinaabe multidisciplinary artist from Kitigan Zibi, whose work he works through the moving image, poetry, music, and sound composition. A practice unfolding over a decade, his creative process has enabled community engagement and travel across Turtle Island and beyond. Craig has participated in many international artist residencies, and his work has been screened in numerous festivals. Craig is currently studying film production at Concordia University and is an advocate for mental wellness and suicide prevention. His practice seeks resurgence, contributing to cultural preservation and revitalization for and by Indigenous peoples. Recently, he has incorporated beadwork into his artistic practice to further this goal. So in this program, we will be screening two of Craig's short films, Call and Response, executed in 2014, and Macrocosmic from 2016, which will be approximately 10 minutes in length. After this, there will be a conversation between Craig and myself to hear more about his artistic practice. Before we begin, I'd like to hand the screen over to Claudette Commanda, who will be providing us with an opening introduction. Thank you so much, Claudette.
Good afternoon. Kaanimich Kishigun Kinun Edishnakas Kitigan Zibi Donjban. Miigwech Kibijayan Oma Nongum. Miigwech Pijajik Oma Anishinaabe Eki Oma Maweniniwag. My name is Claudette Commanda, and I welcome each and every one of you beautiful people to the unsurrendered, unceded homeland of the Algonquin people. I am exceptionally honored and so proud to bring forth words of greeting, words of welcome, because today is a day that we recognize and we honor a dear friend and a dear relative, Craig Commanda. I'm so proud of Craig. I'm so proud of Craig and his gift of creativity, is using that gift that he has of art in the form of filming, in the form of beadwork. It's so beautiful. Craig, thank you. Thank you for sharing with us the beauty of your creativity, and in your documentaries, in your films, and in your beadwork. Powerful, powerful messages. And the pride that you have in who you are as an Algonquin First Nation. And I'm so proud of you, my little relative. I'm so proud of you. You are blessed. You are blessed with this creativity of art. And we know that art in the various forms, no matter what it is and how you express your artwork, it is healing. It is a tool of education. It is a tool of celebration. And it also is a tool of healing. It also brings forth the validation of self, the validation of culture and language, the validation of your community, your family, and the validation of your nation. So I thank you, Craig Commanda. Keep up the good work. Keep up the good work. I am so proud of you. And to all the viewers that are here to join the exhibit, please pay close attention to all the artwork that will be shared from today and tomorrow as we move forward. Art is an expression of one's spirit. Art is an expression of the beauty of life and the beauty and the understanding that an artist has, and to share his or herself powerful messages that come forward, powerful messages. Let us rejoice. Let us come together to celebrate these fantastic, gifted artists. Let us learn from the artists. Let us carry their message forward. And again, I say, Chimigwech, Craig, continue the good work that you are doing. I am so proud of you, as our ancestors are so proud of you. Beautiful, beautiful work you are doing. You are a beautiful soul. You are a beautiful person. And keep up the good work. I love you. Chimigwech. Chimigwech. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, Claudette, for that beautiful introduction and for taking the time to be with us here today for this program. I'm pleased now to introduce the two films by Craig Commanda, Call and Response and Macrocosmic. Please note that these films will be subtitled in English. Subtitles in English, French, and Spanish are available at wapikoni.com/filmmaker/Craig-Commanda, while subtitles in both English, French, and Algonquin are also now on view at the LOJIQ. Thank you.
I've always been around music, but I've not really been around the music of my culture. I've always heard, but never really listened. I seem to be missing something. I feel that I'm caught in the middle of two worlds. I don't know my songs or my words. It's foreign to me. I can only express myself in this way. I feel guilty for not knowing the sounds of my culture, and I sincerely regret not learning more about it. I can feel the space left by its absence. The silence is deafening. reason I never learned is because I'm not ready to receive the teaching. Maybe if I listen, I can hear what it has to say. Manado. Apich kabi onjaba jendaj. Kachi wasa. Nabnesi kakana. Chikamen Tegnigo Nenga. Oshkahiwan Minwaj Weskadong. Kakana Wabanda Hidazimagad. Zibi Pimijuan Kakana Endaching. Awaj Tabasenimo Oji Mino Pagadinige. Ki Minjamiwinanan Ki Minjaminigonanan. Mio pepejik iji mikodadieng. Kijebanado oaba mochichaguning, waban dizinanawan. Kakana kida woman kaya kan kida wasimin. Kakana nasab kidaji a woman.
So thank you again for joining us today, Craig. It's so wonderful to get a chance to watch your films again, which are both currently on view as part of OAG's exhibition, Filtered. So why don't we just start this question and answer period with you, Craig, telling us a little bit about yourself in your own words.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much for having me on for this talk. Really appreciate it. So I'm from Kitigan Zibi. I'm Algonquin Anishinaabe, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I work in music, film, beadwork, poetry, photography, traditional crafts, and a whole lot more. And currently I'm in Montreal right now. I am studying for my film production degree and just currently working on finishing that off. And yeah, I really enjoy the journey that I'm on right now as an artist. And I'm just so excited to see what I'll do next, I guess. Yeah.
So are we. Yes. Very exciting. I love that you work in all sorts of different mediums and you're not afraid to experiment, for sure. Perhaps we could then jump into discussing the film Call and Response, which we just saw, which features yourself playing the guitar in a very surreal setting. Sorry, Craig, I'm just going to bring up the slideshow. So Call and Response, how does this setting and this very surreal setting relate to the overall theme of this work? Maybe you could just talk us through this a little bit.
Yes. So Call and Response was like a snapshot of what I was thinking and feeling at the time as it relates to, as it relates to my understanding of my identity, my relationship to what we call identity, and grappling with that and what it means to be in relation and finding my place in the intersectionality of my particular life and my lack of, cultural knowledge growing up. So this film was an attempt for me to sort of rearrange how I thought a little bit and try to put things into a different perspective for me to think about. At the time, this film had, I think, had a lot of resonance with a lot of Indigenous youth, such as myself, folks younger than me, and even folks who are older than me too. The film, I guess, was at that time like an expression of, I don't know, I'm not sure if it's like a subconscious expression or something like that, but somehow I'm reaching out into a greater conversation that a lot of us have been thinking about. And so for me, that's what the film most represents.
Yeah, I love that. And what just sort of the process, like it seems you're in a forest setting. Where was this filmed, and who is the other musician who's playing with you?
So this place was actually filmed. It was actually filmed where my grandmother's house is, in the back, in like yeah, and like in the back in like a little wooded area, not very far at all. So it was kind of cool. We set up some like carpenter lights and stuff like that for lighting, just sort of borrowed what we could to light the scene. And the other person is a community member from my community. His name's Rene Racine. He's a really good guy, and really must thank him for appearing in my work to do this with me.
Yeah, I love it. So that the title, Call and Response, it's about listening and communicating through music. And I think it's absolutely beautiful. Was it, while you were filming, was it sort of like a jam session where you sort of working together collaboratively as the filming was happening? Or did you have a composition sort of pre-prepared?
No, I think I started doing that as I was on the scene.
Mm.
No, actually, I would say it was a bit of both. Yeah, yeah. The film had that sort of feel when I was even making it too. It's sort of like I had a direction in which I wanted to go. I just didn't already have a path that would bring me through there. I had to sort of find my way through, as it were.
Hmm. Improvisational, I guess is the word. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Yeah.
it came together to be the film.
It's a very beautiful film. And so you began as a musician and then went into sort of filmmaking, correct? Like that's sort of your trajectory, and you're still doing a lot of music now. So what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. And I think the role of music sort of keeps popping up in your work, even in Macrocosmic. The background music, I'm thinking it's also one of your compositions. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Macrocosmic was an interesting piece to make. That's because when I had it all in my software, it wasn't all quite together. Like the music was kind of in parts, and I had to space out the narration as well as to get the edits all together. So a lot of this was very open, very free floating, if you want. And I had to spend some time weaving it all together to create the film that we see now. So the music for that film, yeah, I really tend to just sort of listen to what the piece wants, and then I'm kind of guided by that to tune my guitar to different intervals so as to facilitate me getting sounds that normally you wouldn't be able to. I change the relationships of the notes to each other in order for me to, I guess, kind of find my voice and find what I want to do, create soundscapes. So that's kind of how I play music and how the music expresses itself in Macrocosmic.
It's very beautiful. And the theme of Macrocosmic, maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because it feels like it's very linked to call and response in terms of this idea of connection and everything being connected, or finding those connections from the small to the large. There seems to be an overlap there.
That's interesting. I didn't really quite think that there was, but I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, I guess the question for me of connecting back to nature, connecting back to culture and practices and things like that. It's always been important for me. I'm trying to constantly gain more knowledge about my culture and things like that. Yeah. I often don't think that there's connection between my work. So I'm often fascinated by other people's interpretation of my work, seeing things that I cannot.
That's right. Sometimes the work speaks back to you after it's been made, and other times the audience who sees it can speak back and add to that as well. But speaking about that idea of connection, unlike call and response, Macrocosmic, you used Anishinaabe Algonquin. And from what I understand, you are a language learner right now. You're learning Algonquin, and you were at the time that you made this as well. And I think it's beautiful. And we have the English and French captions in the gallery as well. But just hearing the language, I think, is extremely important for this piece.
Yeah, I believe so too. I really started, I think, trying to get some help to translate my narrations for film, because I view it as another chance, another opportunity to have more things with the language out there, and which in itself preserves and revitalizes the language. So for me, having more of the work out there in itself is important. And yeah, I'm just trying to get back, me too, to understanding the world through my language, which is not an easy thing to do. But through film, I find it fascinating that we can still, through visuals, see how we see the world. The worldview as and in its relationship to framing, I find very fascinating.
Framing. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. I mean, here's another beautiful film still. What was it like to sort of frame the world, so to speak, in sort of this macro way for this film? And where was it filmed? That's another question I have. And so the process of going through with your lens to get these beautiful shots.
Yes. So the piece itself was recorded in various locations, like the filming in various spots around Kitigan Zibi. But also I somehow ended up in Niagara Falls during the time that the mobile was in my community. So I managed to get some shots of the waterfall, like some of the cloud conditions that day, and I included it in the film. Yeah, so for me, when it comes to framing my work and why I chose to do the macro, for me, it becomes like searching for and looking at things that most folks wouldn't take two looks at, and looking at the worlds that are I don't want to say unseen, but perhaps unacknowledged. I know in opening prayers sometimes, whether it's in Anishinaabe or Ganyageha or Cree or what have you, there's always an acknowledgement of even the tiniest insects and little bugs and like frogs and all the little creatures that support the major ecosystem. And in some way, I think that this piece sort of pays homage to that. It acknowledges how, or I suppose in general, the fragility of life. Yeah, because like all it takes is something to go wrong, and oops, we end up like one of those insects or something. Yeah. So for me, the piece also speaks to a little bit of humility that we might want to have in our lives when it comes to this too. Maybe not just us, but maybe people we know or things like that. Like, I think about how, I guess, precious and fleeting it is, and the piece itself talks about what happens like to our souls when they leave our vessels. And I really just wanted to take the chance with this piece to think in a more philosophical way, but outward, rather than being a little more introspective. This film and the film before it, that's the main difference between the two.
Right. Yes, they're very different films, but the theme of connection for me is what sort of linked them. But I agree, there's a different overall feel. This one is very contemplative and building that respect as well for the land. And the way that you set the tone with music as well differentiates the two films. I completely agree. But you're not just a musician and a filmmaker. You have a wider artistic practice, which also involves beading, and as you mentioned, all of the other multidisciplinary practice and mediums that you work in. And OEG has some of these works on display as part of our exhibition as well. So here's one, the coded scroll. So this is a beaded QR code. And this code actually works. So it leads to one of your poems. And I thought maybe you could read it out and then we could sort of talk about the coded scroll and then also the poem and sort of the meaning and the link between the two.
Sure thing. So here is my poem that I wrote having to do with the QR code project that I made, which is now on display at OAG. Circles of concentric circles encircle me, threading, enveloping, many paths pulling, tearing, shattered glass, stitched into obfuscation, a ripped fabric, cut transmission lines, turning from joy to the tragic. Indeed, will we become the Indians in the attic? Breaking beads, color by color, little by little, our light was smothered, but we saved some in an oil lamp to survive the Canadian concentration camps.
Thank you, Craig. And so when a visitor in the gallery can come and sort of put their phone up to your beaded QR code, and then it digitally links to that poem. So much to talk about. We could talk about the poem, but first maybe let's talk about that relationship between beading, the digital, and then why it was so important that it links to this poem for you.
What's interesting, I think, about beadwork, especially if you're doing bead weaving, is that you can think of it like code 2, which probably why it was so much of a fit for me to do a QR code piece. Coders will tell you, like, well, I was talking to folks who were working in like code and things like that, and like the similarities and parallels between the two. Like as they would describe their craft to me, I thought it was really fascinating how there was so many things that were lining up. And so for me, like a bead is like a character in your coding program, for example. So you can think of it as an analog computer, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to describe it, I would say. Which is, again, another reason why I think using the beads as a medium for a QR code makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to play with how something so analog, just beads and thread, can end up with something digital.
Yeah. And why was it important that this poem sort of be in that digital sphere?
So for context, I made this project as part of an intensive course that I did with Concordia, and it was for the International Symposium on Electronic Arts. And so I challenged myself to make this because I wanted to have something like a digital project, but I was doing a lot of beading at the time. So I just had the brilliant idea one day to just, okay, why don't I just do a QR code and have it linked to something like this poem here. So yeah. I can talk about the poem now, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And basically, the poem talks about the legacies of colonialism and also how we use things like beadwork or other cultural practices in order to have at least one little flame to warm ourselves by, one little flame to keep that massive darkness at bay. And that's what I wanted to talk about in the poem here too, because I've been doing a lot of reading and thinking about how in history, like in World War II, they had the concentration camps, right? But they didn't come from nowhere. They actually came from North America. They sent people to study the residential school system, the pass system, the effectiveness of how they, do their oppression against indigenous people. They took it and they went over back to Germany to create the concentration camps. So when I'm talking about the Canadian concentration camps, it's not just like a fib or anything like that. It's actually referring to the residential schools, which would eventually become the ghettos, the concentration camps. And so I kind of wanted to talk about that like a little bit in the work here. I wanted people to know that, awful things happened, that we also survived, and that we're thriving now. Like, you're reading that poem because someone like me survived that wasn't supposed to, that ended up living and creating this to educate you. Educate you. You get to read my work because I lived.
Yep.
I like it's it might be a little weird to say it bluntly like that, but it's actually true when you think about it.
No, I think we should say it bluntly like that. It was a genocide. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so basically that's what this piece is about, is genocide that happened to us, but also our survival and futurity too, because the piece itself exists. The way it exists, I think, is speaking to futurity, because someone else probably might want to make something like that and maybe link it to something important. Let's say, like this, I feel like could be a launching pad for other folks to maybe follow up and do something really cool.
Mm-hmm. But that's it, right? So taking sort of a traditional practice of beading
Mm-hmm.
and threading that through into sort of a digital, future,
Yeah.
right? That idea of survivance.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, that's what Call and Response is talking about as well, right? It's how do you merge my contemporary sort of existence, which has been severed by, colonialism from a traditional past. How do I merge and connect those back together again in order to not just survive, but thrive and continue these cultural traditions and building on them?
Yeah, which is, I think, another really important aspect of it as well. Get access to modern tools and modern things. And there's this, I would say, interplay between retaining what from, let's say, like the bush and cultural values, and then how do we, with these new tools, pay tribute to that, but then also carry ourselves into the future? How are we writing ourselves into the future, speaking ourselves into the future with what we have now? And how do we show that even though we have access to different resources, we don't lose who we are? Because we are nothing if not, as Indigenous peoples, adaptable to our ever-changing circumstances. I mean, sure, we didn't have anything that changed for like thousands of years, but that's because we didn't need to. And I know that the reason we survived was because we adapted to our environment. And with things that are changing now, it'll be no different, I would say, in terms of how we will manage to survive because of old things like how strong our communities are. And now I think the challenge becomes not losing ourselves in the technology, but then also thinking about how we can use it in a critical way.
Yeah, thank you. Thinking a little bit about poetry, right? So poetry is part of your practice as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that poetic sense comes through it in the two films that we've seen, and yet again here. And I love the way that you've written this poem as well, the way that it's written out, the way that it sort of sets a pace with one word sometimes per line. Did you ever study poetry, or has this been something you've always been doing? Do you write things down sort of as part of your practice? Maybe you can tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, out of all the practices that I do, this one is a little bit underutilized, perhaps. I actually didn't go to school for writing or poetry or anything like that. I just wanted to express myself and really just relied on listening to the inner voice to how would you say, get myself to a point where what I'm writing becomes understandable to the viewer, the reader. I want to have just enough that I can express myself artistically, but I want folks to be able to make connections as they read. That for me is important. I don't want to be too abstract when it comes to poetry. I want, firstly and foremostly, for folks to understand, because what I'm trying to say has always been about either educating or making my point clear about whatever I'm talking about at that time. Yeah. So poetry, I did not know that I was one, a poet. I mean,
I think you are. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those things. Just one of those things I didn't know that I would enjoy doing, but I would like to maybe study in the future some technique and see if I can expand my range a bit, write longer form.
Develop it even more than you have already, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about more of your bead work. So these are two beaded works that are part of our exhibition at the OEG right now. And they're such interesting geometrical forms. And I think it really shows your experimentation with this medium to sort of its fullest. So just tell us a little bit about like how you're making these works, sort of the choices that you're making, the interesting techniques. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so these pieces were interesting because they formed the first iterations of what would become my style. And all of these were built on a succession of ideas and what my direction was at that time. So it was a combination of many different bead weaving techniques. And I didn't set out to have any particular meaning at first. It was only when the piece was done that I really, I guess, could see what sort of shape it wanted to be or what name it wanted. Oftentimes I don't even name the pieces at all. I just sort of make it, or I'll make it for a particular reason or for a person, like for a commission. And I will begin pulling in different things like person's attributes, where they're from, what they do, maybe things like that. And yeah, it depends on why the piece is being made. That will determine its meaning, more so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But when that little green one came about and I finished it, it just looked so much like a turtle. So I decided to call it Turtle.
And again, you're using Algonquin.
Yeah, that's right. Also, Asinabka has used that particular image on their branding for their 10th year anniversary for the film festival. So they might still have some shirts left.
Amazing. Yeah. It's such an interesting, visually interesting piece. So it's perfect for that purpose. So sorry, I just want to make sure that we sort of say some of these words out loud. How do you pronounce the word turtle? Mikinak?
Yeah, Mikinak.
Mikinak. Perfect. And the other is the black orchid. So these were named after. So it's sort of more of an intuitive process for you then. And then
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of what I do is mainly intuitive. And then it's only after it's done that I figure out what I did.
Right. But again, I think that link seems to link back to your films yet again in terms of this idea of sort of improvisation or automatization, where you're sort of you're going with sort of the flow, and then you sort of reflect back, as you're nearing completion. I think it's really beautiful.
Thank you kindly.
Mm-hmm. And then there's one other work in the show that I think it's really important. Oh, well, actually, wait, this is before we move on to the last work in the show. I forgot that we have some beautiful images from your Instagram of some of these other really unique, like new and recent works that you've been working on. Do you just want to sort of tell us a little bit about some of these pictures?
Sure thing. So let's see. Let's start with that bracelet. That bracelet there was a little UFO, an unfinished object that I had lying around for a while. I completely forgot that it existed for like a while. And then I had a friend come over and help me clean up, and that thing popped out, and I saw it, and I was like, oh, maybe now I feel like I have the energy to finish off this bracelet. And yeah, so that's how that ended up getting done finally. Yeah. Now this piece with the edging there, with the blue, not the blue beads, but like the sort of green seafoam looking beads, that's a $20 bucket hat that I bought at Canadian Tire. And then I decided to start doing beads on it. And I really liked this certain edging style that I've seen other people doing at the time. So I was like, wow, I'm pretty curious, I would like to try, just to see if I could do this stitch. And you know what, why not try it out on this here, old bucket hat. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm gonna go all the way around and probably stick a patch on there, and I'll have myself a nice little hat to go in the water with. That, or I'll sell it and someone else will have a nice hat to go in the water with.
I like how you take something so generic and then make it so special. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like nobody else is gonna have a hat with that particular edging too, because like it's gonna take at least 3 times as long for me to go all the way around that hat versus a more conventional method of putting them on there. Yeah,
it's a very laborious process, very detailed process. Like these beads are very small. These things take a long time. Are you just constantly beading like all the time, or what? How do you sort of incorporate that into, because you're also going to school? How does that work?
I do it before class, during class, after class. Well, especially since the era of Zoom came out, right? Zoom makes it so much more easier for me to just sit at my table, have my beads out and my light, and just listen to the lecture. Really, really cool. I also would do this in class too, actually, because I have film classes and things like that. So what I would do is in the middle of the lecture hall, where they have like, because they well, actually, Concordia has theaters where we'll go and we'll sit and we'll watch film and, have a film class. So they usually have in the middle of the class, about halfway up, like a booth, a little sit-down booth with like a table. So what I would do is go to class early, and I would take over this booth and I would set up my spread. So instead of having just a tiny little disc to put all my stuff on, I have this nice spread. I can just put all that stuff out there, and I can just do my stuff as the lecture's going.
Love that.
So yeah. So I would find little moments to do this practice as I was going to school, and even now that's what I do. Like whenever, wherever.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I should probably talk about that sculpture too. That was a commission. And I would have to say that this piece in particular is probably one of my biggest pieces that I've ever made so far. Like,
so what's the scale? We can't get a sense of the scale with the picture.
Okay, yeah. Thing's got some weight to it, and it's about, let's see, the length of my hand and taller. I realize that's not very helpful, but
no.
Maybe it's about the size of like a heart, or maybe even a little bigger.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was a commission that's been delivered now, and it's now living a happy life with another happy client. So I'm really excited that I was able to sell a large piece. I didn't really think that these pieces would have much of a life, outside the gallery, let's say. But their popularity continues to surprise me all the time. Yeah, so definitely definitely the big ones are serious inquiries only, for sure. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I make smaller versions too. I've been experimenting with miniaturization. So I have smaller ones than that are about half the size. And then I shrunk it down even further to about the size of my knuckle. Yeah.
There's something beautiful about how precious some of those small ones are, though. Like even the ones in the gallery, there's something very jewel-like and precious about them, which I think again links back to like Macrocosmic. It's like looking at this something small that's incredibly beautiful and taking the time to, even in the gallery, like walk sort of around the case, taking in all the angles, taking in all the different color choices. Like, because even though, you know, it's green, there's like many different kinds of green in that work. And you were probably, you know, had all your different green beads all laid out.
Oh, I did.
Sure you're doing the right one, you know. So it's like
yeah.
having an appreciation of something so small and so beautiful.
Yeah, I must say, getting into certain angles on that piece became a real challenge after a while, just because of all the curvature that was happening, all the different angles. Like, holy geez, it became like I would have to like bend the needle in order for it to like go through. I have to go through like 2 beads, go back through 1 just to be able to get it through. It was adventurous to make that piece. That's for sure. The turtle piece especially, like, wow. Yeah. The big one here wasn't too bad, but that one there, it was difficult because that one actually was made with my other pieces have been made with a start of 5 beads, so that's 5 angles going out, but the turtle was made with 7, so there's 7 angles going out. So going around all that time is times 7. And I believe that I had at least 26 different piles of beads to do the Mikanak piece. So I would go all the way around one side, all the way around, you know, that's 26 times like 7.
Wow.
Yeah. And the Black Orchid is 5. So that one, I'd say maybe about the same size. And the big one that was on the slide after this was I believe 50 or 60 per side. So that's like 50 or 60 times 5.
Wow. Incredible.
And the patches on the left are something that well, actually the design for that I picked up from a gift giveaway that I was a part of when I went to the bush this past summer. And so there was a giveaway, and one of the persons there was giving away a design. And so I picked it up. I was like, oh, this might be cool. And I just started working with it. I just like duplicated the design and I started to experiment with it, really. And from that same camp, I harvested some pike vertebra, and I cleaned those up and I bleached those. And so if you look at the patch itself, the middle part is actually a vertebra, pike vertebra. Yeah. So I incorporated it into that. And so
bead, it becomes a big bead almost, right?
Yeah, like, basically, yeah. It's like a big old cab. And so I put that down, and then I mysteriously, there was like, I was doing some beading like in the bush, right? And I'm cleaning up and stuff. And like, I was using a particular kind of bead. It was this transparent crystal that when you looked at it in the sun looked kind of like soap. You know how it has an iridescence to it? So I had like smaller versions of that particular type of bead. And then I come across this bag of that same type of bead that I just described, but in the biggest size that I don't have. So I ended up using that to secure the pike bone to the fabric. So mysterious bag of beads that came to me. Probably just someone just dropped them off. I was like, you'll probably use these. So thanks to that mysterious person, whoever dropped that off for me, but I'm using it now, and that's what I use here in the piece.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I also do some bead weaving too, because I do some embroidery first to secure it on there, and then I build upwards from that. That's why on the orange you can see that it's built upward a little bit. It's a little bit of bead weaving and bead embroidery hybrid.
Yeah, sort of the texture on the top there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, really beautiful.
Thank you.
I think let's talk about the last work that's in the exhibition itself. So this also incorporates beading. We remember. And it's a very powerful piece, and the red dress is symbolic of the missing and murdered Indigenous women. And I'd like to hear sort of for you the importance of this work.
Yeah. So this work first came about at the 2019 vigil in Montreal. So what Native Montreal was doing was that they had supplies out, and they were having people make banners and like signs and stuff like that for the vigil, for like the march and stuff. So I ended up going over there. I wanted to make something, and I was wondering what I ought to make. So then I started brainstorming, and then it's like just suddenly I started getting like this flow of all these like amazing ideas, just sort of formulating itself and coalescing in my mind. And I really feel like maybe I made a connection there with them to make this piece. I really feel like there was a collaboration more so than it was just a creation of mine. I really feel like this piece was like a spiritual collaboration in that sense, because it just happened to me so quickly, and the idea was so strong. That's kind of the conclusion I came to with that. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to complete the work in time for the vigil. It took a little more labor than I had anticipated, but I kept on with it nonetheless. I wanted to complete the work, and so I finally did, and I finally was able to show it around in Montreal, which is really cool. And yeah, so for me, this piece is really important because I'm not sure how many other pieces exist out there that are specifically talking about Glass Tolley, Maisie LOJIQ, and Shannon Alexander. There might be, and I just haven't seen it yet, but I want to add to that canon with this piece, and I want people to specifically remember, these are people that existed, and now they're not. And hopefully that the piece itself provokes more discussion about, the broader underlying themes that underpin all of this, and that, maybe can come to some learning or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, I agree. And I think that's why it's especially important that it, be on view in the Ottawa Art Gallery for publics who are on Indigenous land, Kitigan Zibi, as you mentioned, have there in the title. It's really important to name these women, to remember them, and to sort of combat the injustice, the racial injustice for these ongoing, deaths, disappearances, and inaction from police departments and our government.
Yeah, I really feel that it's important for me to have Algonquin work on Algonquin territory, and especially if it is a piece that is speaking to this epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And yeah, I really, I get, how would you say, like, I think about like futurity and stuff like that. Like if I ever, like, I'm gonna have to worry about my kid having to be uplifted from birth, like a birth alert. I have to worry about social workers coming to like take the kid and make up some some baloney reason as to why, things like that, like real fears that we have to deal with, and I think about that now too, as a person who's gonna, like, I don't know what my future holds. I just know that in this future, there's people that are gonna want to take probably the most precious thing from me for no reason. Well, there is reasons, but so I think about these things a lot when I make work like this, because people are experiencing it right now, ongoing oppression right now. Canada functions on this same oppression. It doesn't have anything without oppressing Indigenous people and dispossessing them of their lands. It's just another example of how many different things connect when it comes to pieces like this.
Yeah, and it's so important for artists like you. Thank you for sharing this and offering it for exhibition. I remember when we were talking about what we were going to include, you said it's very important that this be included.
Well, I'm very happy that you did. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. So thanks so much for taking the time to talk today. Is there anything else that you that we didn't address that you would like to talk about?
That's a really good question, actually.
There's so much we didn't cover. I know there's so much to say, but
yeah. Well, as long as folks know that there's more authentic Anishinaabe Algonquin work out there made by me, an Anishinaabe Algonquin artist, that is very important, because even just recently, Kitigan Zibi has suffered attacks from folks who pretend and claim to be from my community, and yet they go and claim grants and things like that. Like, you know what I mean? So for me, producing work out there and people knowing that it's authentic, it's Anishinaabe art from an Anishinaabe artist, that's very important to me. And I don't know, I just maybe want to say that as my ending.
yes, no, thank you. So yes, thank you for sharing your work and your thoughts and for partaking in this conversation. Thank you as well to the audience who is joining us. And I would encourage viewers to check out Craig's beautiful work that's in our exhibition and on view until January 2nd, 2022. And also check out Craig's Instagram page at CraigCommanda Creations. As a publicly funded institution, I'd also like to thank our core funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, and the City of Ottawa, as well as BMO, who is sponsoring our In Conversation programs. We would also like to thank Wapikoni, who is the distributor of the two films by Craig that we were able to see. So please sign up for our newsletter on our website to have frequent updates, and follow our social media channels for upcoming virtual artist talks, screenings, and programmings related to our exhibitions. So thank you so much again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.